The sky over Cedar Falls, Texas looked like a bruise. Chris Stringer sat in his beat-up Honda Civic, engine off, staring through the windshield at the gathering storm. Purple and black clouds rolled in from the west, swallowing the last orange streaks of sunset like they had somewhere better to be. The air coming through his cracked window was thick, heavy. The kind of humid that made your shirt stick to your back and your thoughts stick to the worst possible outcomes. He was parked outside Myra's parents' house. A modest two-story with peeling white paint and a porch swing that squeaked every time the wind picked up. Which was a lot tonight. 20 years old, that's all he was. 20 years old and so in love it made his chest hurt. Myra sat in the passenger seat. She hadn't said a word in 15 minutes. They'd been at the Dairy Queen on Main Street, the one with the flickering open sign and the booth in the back corner that had become their spot over the past 2 years. Burgers, blizzards, the usual Saturday night routine, except nothing about tonight had felt usual. Myra had barely touched her food. She'd pushed the fries around her plate like she was playing some kind of sad geometry game. And when Chris had tried to make her laugh, his go-to move, the thing that always worked, she'd just given him this tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Now here they were, parked, silent, the space between them feeling wider than the 2 feet of cracked leather seat. Myra. Chris finally broke the silence. His voice came out softer than he intended. "What's wrong?" She flinched, actually flinched, like the question was a physical thing that had touched her. "Nothing. Come on." He reached over, touched her hand. Her fingers were cold despite the Texas heat. "Talk to me. You've been weird all night, all week, actually. Did I do something?" "Because if I did, you didn't do anything." "Then what?" The street lamp outside her parents' house flickered on, casting orange light through the windshield. It caught Myra's face just right or just wrong depending on how you looked at it. Chris could see the fear there. The way her jaw was set tight, the way her eyes kept darting everywhere except at him. His stomach dropped. "Myra, please." She took a breath, a big one, the kind you take before you jump off a cliff or say something you can't take back. "I've been thinking." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "About us." "Okay." Chris's heart was hammering now. "Thinking what? I'm not sure." She paused, swallowed hard. "I'm not sure we're each other's people." The words hung in the air like smoke. Chris heard them. He definitely heard them, but his brain refused to process them. It was like someone had spoken to him in a foreign language, and he was just standing there, waiting for the translation that would make everything make sense. "What?" His voice cracked. He hated that it cracked. "I've been feeling this way for a while now." Myra still wouldn't look at him. She was staring at her own hands, twisted together in her lap. "I think maybe we want different things. Maybe we're just not right for each other." "Not right for each other." Chris heard his voice rising and couldn't stop it. "Myra, we've been together 2 years. 2 years. You're telling me this now?" "I know." She sounded miserable. "I know, and I'm sorry. You just what?" "I just can't do this anymore." The first raindrop hit the windshield, then another, then a dozen more. Within seconds, the sky opened up like it had been holding its breath and finally let go. Chris sat there, stunned. Where was this coming from? Yesterday, everything had been fine. Last week, she told him she loved him. Last month, they'd talked about the future, his plans for business school, her nursing degree, the apartment they'd get together once they graduated. Had all of that been a lie? "Did I do something wrong?" He hated how desperate he sounded, hated it, but he couldn't help it. "Just tell me what I did wrong and I'll fix it. Whatever it is, I'll—" "It's not about fixing anything, Chris." There were tears in her voice now. "Sometimes things just don't work. Sometimes people grow apart." "We haven't grown apart. I see you every single day." "That's not what I—" She stopped, pressed her palms against her eyes. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier, more final. "I think we need a break." "A break?" "Yes, you want to break up with me." "I didn't say—" "That's what a break is, Myra. Don't dress it up in pretty words like I'm stupid." The rain was coming down harder now, sheets of it hammering the roof of the Civic like a drum. Through the blur of the windshield, Chris could barely make out the shape of her parents' house anymore. His hands were shaking. He gripped the steering wheel just to have something to hold on to. "So what do we do now?" The words tasted like ash in his mouth. "What, you just walk away after everything?" "I don't know." Myra's hand was on the door handle now. "I need some time to think. We both do." "I don't need time to think. I know what I want. I want you." She finally looked at him then, really looked at him. And the expression on her face was worse than anything she'd said out loud. It was pity, mixed with something else he couldn't quite name. "Let's take a few days," she said quietly. "Okay, just a few days, then we can talk. Talk about what, how you want to throw away everything But she was already opening the door, already stepping out into the rain. "Myra, wait." She didn't wait. She slammed the door behind her and ran, up the walkway, up the porch steps, through the front door. The porch light illuminated her for just a second, her dark hair already soaked, plastered to her face, and then she was gone. The door closed behind her. Chris sat alone in his car. The rain hammered down. He didn't know how long he sat there. Long enough for the windows to fog up from his breathing. Long enough for the street lamp to flicker twice and go out completely. Long enough for the tight feeling in his chest to spread until his whole body felt like one giant bruise. Not each other's people. What did that even mean? He thought about going up there, knocking on the door, demanding answers, but what would that accomplish? Her parents already looked at him like he was some kind of charity case. Chris Stringer, the kid from the wrong side of Cedar Falls, the one whose dad took off when he was 12, and whose mom worked double shifts at the diner just to keep the lights on. They'd probably call the cops if he showed up on their porch in the middle of a thunderstorm, soaking wet and wild-eyed. No. He needed to go home. He needed to sleep this off. He needed to. A flash of lightning lit up the sky. For one split second, everything was white and sharp and too bright, then darkness again. Chris turned the key in the ignition. The engine coughed once, twice, then caught. The windshield wipers swept back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the downpour. He pulled away from the curb. Drove down Main Street past the Dairy Queen, past the high school where they'd first met, past the church where her parents went every Sunday like clockwork. All the landmarks of their relationship now looking different in the rain. Smaller somehow, less important. His phone sat on the passenger seat. Silent. He willed it to buzz. Willed Myra to text him, call him, say it was all a mistake, she didn't mean it, please come back. The phone stayed dark. 10 minutes later, he was pulling into the graveled driveway of his mom's little house. The porch light was on. It was always on. His mom left it burning every night, even when she knew he'd be late, even when the electricity bill was already too high. He sat in the car for another minute, just breathing. The rain was letting up now, already. Texas storms were like that, violent and sudden, then gone just as fast, leaving everything damp and confused in their wake. Kind of like his relationship, apparently. Chris closed his eyes, pressed his forehead against the steering wheel. 2 years of his life, all those plans. All those promises, and she'd just, woken up one morning and decided she was done? No, there had to be more to it, had to be. He'd give her the few days she asked for. He'd give her space. He'd be the bigger person, the patient one, the guy who didn't panic and didn't push and didn't make everything worse by being desperate. And then he'd get her back. Because that's what you did when you loved someone, right? You fought for them. You didn't just give up because things got hard. Chris got out of the car. The air smelled like wet earth and ozone, clean, new. He walked toward the house, toward the light, his shoes squelching in the mud. But even as he told himself it would be okay, even as he promised himself this was just a rough patch, just a bump in the road, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. That maybe Myra had been right about one thing, at least. Some storms don't just blow over. Some storms change the whole landscape. 3 days felt like 3 years. Chris barely slept, barely ate. He went through the motions, showed up to his classes at the community college, worked his shifts at the warehouse, smiled when his mom asked if he was okay, but inside he was hollow. A shell of a person going through the motions of living. His phone never left his hand. He checked it constantly, obsessively. Every notification made his heart jump. Every silence made it sink. Myra hadn't texted. Hadn't called, hadn't reached out at all. He typed about 50 messages to her, deleted every single one. The ones that were too desperate, the ones that were too angry, the ones that said nothing at all except please, which felt both too much and not enough. His tiny apartment, more like a glorified closet above the hardware store on 5th Street, had never felt so empty. The walls were thin enough that he could hear Mrs. Patterson's TV droning on next door, but somehow that just made the silence louder. His textbook sat untouched on the kitchen table. The photo of him and Myra on the nightstand, the one from the Cedar Falls 4th of July festival last summer, both of them sunburned and laughing, seemed to mock him every time he looked at it. He'd considered taking it down, couldn't bring himself to do it. Day 4, Tuesday morning. Chris was sitting on his sagging couch, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that kind of looked like a face if you squinted when his phone rang, not a text, an actual call. He fumbled for it so fast he nearly dropped it. The screen flashed, Myra. His thumb hit accept before his brain could catch up. "Hello, Chris." Her voice was thick, stuffy, like she'd been crying. Can you come over? To your parents' place?" "No, I'm—" a sniffle. "I'm outside your apartment in the parking lot." Chris was off the couch and at the window in 2 seconds flat. Sure enough, Myra's little blue Toyota was sitting in the gravel lot below. He could see her silhouette in the driver's seat. "Stay there." He was already grabbing his keys, jamming his feet into sneakers. "I'm coming down." He took the stairs 2 at a time, nearly tripped on the last one, didn't care, burst through the side door into the morning light. Myra was getting out of her car as he reached the lot, and the sight of her nearly stopped him in his tracks. She looked terrible. Her eyes were swollen and red. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, like she hadn't had the energy to do anything else with it. She was wearing an old hoodie he recognized as his, one he'd loaned her months ago and never gotten back. "Chris!" Her voice broke on his name. And then she was running toward him, and he was running toward her, and they collided in the middle of the parking lot like 2 planets caught in each other's gravity. "I'm sorry." She was crying into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it, I was wrong, I was so wrong." Hey. He pulled back just enough to see her face. "Slow down, breathe." "I can't breathe, I've been such an idiot." "Myra, come inside." He led her up the stairs to his apartment. The place was a mess, dirty dishes in the sink, laundry piled on the chair, evidence of 3 days of neglect everywhere, but she didn't seem to notice. She just stood in the middle of the cramped living room, arms wrapped around herself, looking lost. Chris guided her to the couch. Sat her down, got her a glass of water, which she held with both hands like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to the earth. "Okay." He sat down beside her, close but not too close. "Talk to me, what happened?" "I was scared." The words tumbled out in a rush. "My dad, he's been sick. The doctors said they might have to do surgery and the bills are piling up and my mom's been a wreck and I started spiraling, started thinking about the future and how uncertain everything is and what if something bad happens and you pushed me away." She nodded miserably. "I do that. When things get hard, I run. It's this thing I do and I hate it and I promised myself I wouldn't do it with you, but then everything felt like it was falling apart and I got so scared that I'd lose you too, so I thought maybe if I was the one to end it, at least I could control something." "That doesn't make any sense." "I know." She laughed, but it was watery and sad. "I know it doesn't make sense. I told you I was an idiot." Chris took the water glass from her hands, set it on the coffee table. Then he took her hands in his, looking her right in the eyes. "Your dad's going to be okay. The surgery's going to work. And even if it doesn't, even if things get harder, running away from me is not the answer. You know that, right?" "I know. Because I'm not going anywhere, Myra. I'm here. I've been here for 2 years and I'm not planning on leaving." "I know. Do you? Because 3 days ago you told me we weren't each other's people and now I was wrong." She squeezed his hand so hard it almost hurt. "I was scared and stupid and wrong. You are my person, Chris. You're the only person who makes me feel like everything's going to be okay, and I almost threw that away because I couldn't handle my own fear." The morning sun was coming through the grimy window, falling across her face in stripes of gold and shadow. Chris looked at her, really looked, and saw everything he'd always seen. The girl who laughed too loud at his dumb jokes, the girl who stayed up late helping him study for exams he didn't care about, the girl who made him believe that maybe his life could be more than warehouse shifts and water-stained ceilings. "I was so scared of losing you," he said quietly. "These past 3 days. I've never felt that empty. I'm sorry." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry I put you through that. Just don't do it again, okay? Talk to me next time, even when you're scared, especially when you're scared. I promise. I mean it, Myra. I promise." She leaned forward then, pressing her forehead against his. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing together, hearts beating together, the fear slowly draining out of both of them. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too." He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Even when you're being an idiot," she laughed, a real laugh this time. And then she kissed him, and he kissed her back, and the world rearranged itself into something that made sense again. Later, After they'd talked more, after she'd told him the full story about her dad's diagnosis and her mom's breakdown and the pressure she'd been under, they lay on his narrow bed together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her back. The photo on the nightstand caught his eye, the two of them at the festival, sunburned and laughing. "We're going to be okay," Myra murmured against his shirt. "Aren't we?" "Yeah." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "We're going to be okay." And in that moment he believed it, completely, totally. But somewhere deep in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered something he wouldn't fully understand until years later. This was a pattern, a warning sign. Myra pulled away when things got hard. She ran when she was scared. And no matter how many times they reconciled, no matter how many promises were made, that pattern wasn't going to change. The morning sun climbed higher. The water stain on the ceiling looked less like a face now, more like a warning, but Chris was too happy to notice. 15 years is a long time, long enough to get married, long enough to buy a house. Long enough to bring 2 kids into the world and watch them grow from screaming bundles of chaos into actual human beings with opinions and attitudes and preferences about everything from breakfast cereal to bedtime stories. Long enough, Chris thought, to believe you knew someone. The house on Magnolia Drive in Austin was everything they'd ever dreamed about. 4 bedrooms. A backyard with an old oak tree perfect for climbing. A kitchen with granite countertops and one of those fancy French door refrigerators that Chris still didn't fully understand how to use. They'd bought it 7 years ago, right after his promotion to regional manager at the logistics company, and Myra had cried happy tears when they got the keys. "This is it," she'd said. "This is our forever home." Forever. Funny how that word could mean so many different things. It was a Saturday morning in late September. The kind of Texas morning where the heat was finally starting to ease up and you could open the windows without feeling like you'd stepped into a convection oven. Sunlight poured through the kitchen windows, making everything look warm and golden and perfect. Chris stood at the counter, pouring coffee into his favorite mug. The one Clay had made him in first grade, lopsided and painted with what was supposedly a dinosaur but looked more like a melting green blob. He could hear the kids in the backyard, their laughter mixing with the distant sound of the neighbors' sprinklers. Clay was 10 now. All knobby knees and endless questions, and a suspicious obsession with YouTube videos about building things. Em was 7, a whirlwind of glitter and opinions who had recently announced that she was going to be either a veterinarian or a mermaid when she grew up. Possibly both. Chris loved them with a ferocity that still surprised him sometimes. Like his heart had grown extra chambers just to hold it all. Myra was at the stove scrambling eggs, or at least she was going through the motions of scrambling eggs. Her movements were mechanical, distant. She hadn't looked at Chris once since he came downstairs. "Kids want to go to the Hendersons later," Chris said, watching her over the rim of his coffee. "Julie texted about a pool party thing. Should be fine, right?" "Ma'am." "Apparently they're setting up the trampoline in their backyard too. Clay's been losing his mind about it." "That's nice." Chris frowned. Myra's voice was flat, colorless, like she was reading from a script she hadn't bothered to memorize. This wasn't new. For weeks now, maybe months, if he was being honest, she'd been like this. Quiet, withdrawn, moving through their life like a ghost haunting her own house. At first, Chris had chalked it up to stress. Her job at the hospital had been brutal lately. 12-hour shifts, short staffing, the usual healthcare nightmare. But even on her days off, even when she should have been relaxed, that same distant look stayed in her eyes. Walking on eggshells, that's what it felt like now. Chris measured every word before he said it, analyzed every gesture, trying to figure out what would crack the shells beneath his feet and what would let him pass safely. "You okay?" he asked carefully. "Fine." I said I'm fine, Chris." The sharpness in her voice made him flinch. The eggs sizzled in the pan. Outside, Em shrieked with laughter at something Clay had done. "Okay." He set down his coffee. "Okay." Breakfast was quiet. The kids chattered about the pool party, about school, about which Netflix show they were going to watch later. Chris and Myra responded at the appropriate moments, but they barely spoke to each other. The food tasted like cardboard. The sunlight felt too bright. Around noon, the kids bounded off to the Hendersons' house, armed with pool noodles and so much sunscreen Chris was pretty sure they could survive a direct nuclear blast. The door slammed behind them, and suddenly the house was quiet. Too quiet. Chris found Myra in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. The golden hour light from the windows turned everything soft and beautiful, the kind of light that made ordinary moments feel like paintings. But there was nothing beautiful about the tension in Myra's shoulders, the tight set of her jaw. "Myra!" He leaned against the counter, keeping his voice gentle. "Talk to me." "Something's been off for weeks, and I'm worried." She didn't look up, just kept rearranging glasses in the dishwasher like the fate of the universe depended on their placement. "There's nothing to talk about." "That's clearly not true. Chris, I'm your husband. If something's wrong, I need to know. Is it work? Your mom? Is there something going on I don't know about?" She stopped. Her hands went still on a coffee mug, the matching one to his blob dinosaur cup the 1M had made the following year. The silence stretched, long enough that Chris could hear the clock on the wall ticking, long enough that his heart started to beat faster. Myra closed the dishwasher, straightened up, and finally turned to face him. Her expression was completely blank, not angry. Not sad, just empty. "Chris," her voice was calm, measured, like she'd rehearsed this. "I've been thinking," those 3 words, God, those 3 words. Chris felt them like a punch to the gut. "Thinking about what? About us." She took a breath. "About whether this is working. Whether what is working, our marriage?" "Yes." The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. The golden light now harsh and accusatory. "Myra, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," she paused, looked down at her hands. When she looked back up, her eyes were dry, steady. "I don't think we're each other's people." The words hit him like a freight train, not each other's people, the same words. The exact same words she'd used 15 years ago, sitting in his car outside her parents' house in Cedar Falls. The words that had shattered his world when they were just kids. "You can't," Chris's voice cracked. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. Myra, we've been married for 12 years, we have children." "I know." "Then how can you, what are you saying to me right now?" Myra's calm was almost worse than anger would have been. She stood there in their beautiful kitchen in the house they'd built together and looked at him like he was a stranger. "I'm saying that I don't feel the same way about us anymore. I've been feeling this way for a while now, and I think I need a change." "A change?" Chris heard his voice rising, couldn't stop it. "What kind of change? Therapy? A vacation? What? A bigger change? There's someone else." It wasn't a question. "That's what this is, isn't it? There's someone else." "No," something flickered in her eyes, irritation maybe. "There's no one else. This is about me, Chris, about what I need." "And what about what I need? What about what the kids need?" "The kids will be fine. Kids are resilient." "Resilient?" Chris laughed, but it came out wrong, harsh and brittle. "Is that what you're telling yourself, that our kids are going to be fine when their mother tears their family apart?" "I'm not tearing anything apart. I'm just—" "You're leaving. That's what you're doing. Admit it." Myra's jaw tightened. "I think I should stay at Lizzie's for a while, give us both some space to think." "I don't need space to think. I know exactly what I want. I want my wife. I want my family. I want the life we built together." "But I don't." 3 words, 4 syllables, and just like that, the ground opened up beneath Chris's feet. He stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by all the evidence of their life together. The kids' artwork on the fridge, the photos on the wall, the pile of permission slips and homework and everyday debris that accumulated when you shared a life with someone, and felt it all turning to dust. "What about us?" His voice came out broken. "What about Clay and Em?" Myra finally moved. She walked past him toward the hallway, not meeting his eyes. "We can talk logistics later," she said over her shoulder. "I'm going to pack some things." "Myra, wait." But she was already gone. Her footsteps echoed down the hall. A moment later, he heard the bedroom door close. Chris stood alone in the golden-lit kitchen. The sound of the neighbors' kids playing drifted in through the open window. Somewhere down the street, someone was mowing their lawn. Normal sounds. Saturday sounds. The soundtrack of a life that had just crumbled to pieces. His hands were shaking. His heart was racing. His mind kept looping back to the same question over and over. How did we get here? How did we get here? Chris didn't know how long he stood in that kitchen. Long enough for the golden light to shift. Long enough for the shadows to stretch across the tile floor like reaching fingers. Then he heard it. The sound of drawers opening down the hall. The zip of a suitcase. The unmistakable noise of someone packing to leave. It snapped something loose inside him. He was moving before he realized it, walking down the hallway toward their bedroom. Their bedroom, the one they'd shared for 7 years, the one where they'd laughed and fought and made up and made love and planned their whole future together. The door was open. Myra stood by the closet, pulling clothes off hangers with quick, efficient movements. A large suitcase lay open on the bed, already half full. "You're actually doing this?" His voice sounded foreign to his own ears. "Right now, today. I told you I need space. Space." The word tasted like acid. "You need space." "Yes, so you're just going to walk out just like that? No discussion, no?" "We've been discussing, Chris." She didn't look up from her packing. "You just don't like what I'm saying. Because what you're saying is insane." She paused then, finally looked at him, and there it was again, that terrifying blankness in her eyes, like she'd already left, like her body was just going through the motions of a decision her heart had made long ago. "I'm sorry you feel that way." Her voice was ice. "But this is happening." Chris's head was pounding. His thoughts were a tangled mess of rage and grief and desperation. 15 years, 12 years married, 2 kids sleeping over at the neighbor's house right now, completely unaware that their world was about to implode. "What about Clay and Em?" The words came out strangled. "What do we tell them?" "We tell them the truth, that sometimes mommies and daddies need to live in different places." Like it's nothing, like it's just... He couldn't finish. He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, trying to breathe, trying to think. Myra went back to packing. The bedroom felt smaller now, the walls pressing in. The family photos on the dresser, their wedding, Clay's first birthday, Em's missing tooth smile, watching like silent accusers. "You can't take them," Chris heard himself say. "The kids, you can't just... They'll come with me." Her tone left no room for argument. "To Lizzie's for now, until we figure out longer-term arrangements." "Longer-term arrangements? You know what I mean." No, I really don't." Chris was pacing now, running his hands through his hair. "An hour ago, we were a family. Now you're talking about arrangements like we're dissolving a business partnership." Myra zipped the suitcase. The sound was obscenely final. "I know this is hard." She said it like she was reading from a hospital script, the tone nurses used when delivering bad news they delivered 1,000 times before. "And I'm sorry it's happening so suddenly. But I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it isn't." "Then let's fix it. Let's go to therapy. I don't want to fix it." She grabbed the suitcase handle and rolled it toward the door. Chris blocked her path. "Move, Chris. No. I said move. And I said no." His voice was shaking now. Everything was shaking. "You don't get to just walk out on 15 years without a fight. You don't get to. There's nothing to fight about." She tried to step around him. "This isn't a negotiation." Something snapped. Chris grabbed her by the shoulders, pushed her, harder than he meant to, against the hallway wall. Her back hit the wooden wainscoting with a thud. A framed family photo rattled in its place. For one terrible, crystallized moment, they just stared at each other. Myra's eyes were wide, not blank anymore, shocked, maybe even scared. And Chris looked down at his own hands, still gripping her shoulders, and felt the horror wash over him like ice water. He let go like she'd burned him. He stumbled back. "Myra, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to." She rubbed the back of her head where it had hit the wall. When she looked at him again, the fear was gone, replaced by something worse, cold, vindicated fury. "Don't you ever touch me again." Her voice was low and deadly. "Do you understand me, ever? I would never hurt you, you just did." "That's not..." Chris was spiraling now, panic replacing anger. "I lost control for 1 second, that's all. I would never..." "Save it." She grabbed her suitcase again. This time when she moved toward the door, he didn't stop her. "Lizzie's going to help me pick up the kids from the Hendersons. I'll bring them back tomorrow morning to talk about next steps." "Myra, please. Let's just talk about this." But she was already walking, down the hall, through the living room, toward the front door. "What am I supposed to do?" His voice cracked on the last word. Just sit here, just let you..." The front door opened. The front door slammed, and then there was silence. Chris stood in the hallway, breathing hard, staring at the door like it might swing back open at any moment. Like Myra might walk back in and say this was all some terrible test, some cruel joke, and of course she wasn't leaving, of course they were going to be okay. The door stayed closed. Outside, a car engine started, faded into the distance. Gone, she was gone. Chris's legs gave out. He slid down against the wall, the same wall he'd pushed her against, God, what was wrong with him, and sat there on the hardwood floor, head in his hands. The house was so quiet now. He could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator, the normal sounds of a normal Saturday afternoon that had become anything but. He'd grabbed her. He'd actually grabbed her. In 15 years together, through every fight, every disagreement, every moment of frustration, he'd never laid a hand on her in anger. And now, in the worst possible moment, he'd given her exactly the ammunition she needed to paint him as the villain. Because that's what she'd do. He knew it with sick certainty. Whatever happened next, lawyers, custody battles, all of it, that moment would define him. The time Chris lost control. The time he proved he was dangerous. Never mind that she'd just demolished their entire life with the casualness of someone returning a sweater that didn't fit. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, making patterns on the floor. Chris watched them shift and move, trying to figure out how to feel anything other than completely, utterly destroyed. His phone buzzed. A text from Clay. "Pool party is awesome. When are you coming to get us?" Chris stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Soon, buddy, have fun." But Myra was going to get there first. Myra and Lizzie swooping in to collect his children to take them away to some apartment or guest room where Chris wasn't welcome. He thought about driving over there, intercepting them, fighting, but what good would that do? More yelling, more chaos, more damage for Clay and Em to witness. No, he had to be smart about this, had to think. The next morning was a blur. Myra arrived at 10, stone-faced and composed like the previous day's meltdown had never happened. The kids tumbled in behind her, still chattering about the pool party, oblivious to the bomb about to drop on their lives. "Can we talk in the kitchen?" Myra's voice was clipped. Professional, Chris nodded, followed her. Left Clay and Em in the living room arguing over the TV remote like any other Sunday morning. "We need to tell them," Myra said once they were out of earshot. "Together." "I know. I'll let you take the lead. She hesitated. "They should hear it from their dad." Chris wanted to laugh at the cruelty of it. She was leaving, she was the one blowing everything up, but he got to be the one to break his children's hearts. "Fine," he said. "Let's do this." They sat at the kitchen table. Clay and Em were summoned in, their faces shifting from confused to worried as they picked up on the tension. "Kids," Chris's voice felt like sandpaper. "Mom and I need to talk to you about something important." Em climbed into the chair next to him. Clay hovered by the door, already suspicious. "What's going on?" Clay asked. "Why's Mom look weird?" Myra flinched, said nothing. Chris took a breath, forced himself to look at his children, the two best things he'd ever done with his life, and deliver the words no parent ever wants to say. Sometimes, he had to start again. Sometimes, when grown-ups have been together for a long time, they realize they need different things. And when that happens, sometimes they decide to live in different houses for a while. Em's face scrunched up. "Like a sleepover? Kind of. God, this was impossible. Except longer. Are you and Mom getting divorced?" Clay's voice was flat, cold. He'd always been the perceptive one. Chris looked at Myra. She was staring at the table. He couldn't say it. "We're going to be living separately for now, but that doesn't change how much we love you, both of you. This isn't your fault. It's got nothing to do with you." "Then WHY?" Em's voice cracked. Tears were already spilling down her cheeks. "Why can't you just stay together? It's complicated, sweetheart." "That's not an answer." I know it isn't." Clay hadn't moved from the doorway. His jaw was clenched tight, his hands balled into fists at his sides. He looked so much like Chris in that moment it was almost unbearable. "This is stupid," Clay said, his voice shook. "This is so stupid. We were fine yesterday, everything was fine." "I know, buddy. Don't call me that." The outburst was sudden, explosive. "You don't get to call me that when you're... He turned and ran. His footsteps pounded up the stairs. A door slammed. Em was full-on sobbing now, her small body shaking with the force of it. Chris pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, feeling his own eyes burn with tears he refused to let fall. "It's okay," he murmured into her hair, even though it wasn't. "It's going to be okay." Myra sat silently through all of it, watching, waiting. When Em's sobs finally subsided into hiccups, Myra finally spoke. "I should go," she stood. "I'll be back later for their things." She left without saying goodbye to the kids. Chris sat at the kitchen table for a long time after, Em curled in his lap like she was 4 years old again, Clay's angry silence bleeding down through the ceiling from his room above. The morning sun made everything golden and warm. It felt like a lie. Around noon, after the kids had retreated to their rooms and the house had settled into a stunned quiet, Chris noticed the envelope. It had been slipped through the mail slot sometime that morning. A large white envelope, crisp and official-looking, no stamp, just his name typed neatly on the front. He picked it up, turned it over. Saw the return address, Harrison and Associates, Family Law, Austin, Texas. His blood went cold. Papers, already. She'd already filed papers, which meant she'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. While he'd been walking on eggshells, trying to figure out what was wrong, she'd been meeting with lawyers, building a case, getting her ducks in a row. He wasn't just losing his marriage. He was about to fight for his life. Chris stood in the silent house, the house he'd bought thinking it would be forever, the house where his children had taken their first steps and lost their first teeth and dreamed their first dreams, and stared at the envelope in his hands. Outside, the sun kept shining. The neighbors' sprinklers hissed. Somewhere down the block, someone's radio played a country song about heartbreak. Normal sounds, Saturday sounds, but nothing was normal anymore. Nothing would ever be normal again. The envelope sat on the kitchen table like a bomb waiting to detonate. Chris had been staring at it for 20 minutes, maybe longer. Time had become slippery since yesterday, since his whole world had cracked open like an egg dropped on concrete. The house was quiet, too quiet. Clay and Em were upstairs in their rooms, processing their own version of this nightmare. Chris could hear the faint sound of Clay's TV through the ceiling, some YouTube video about building contraptions. The kid always retreated into that stuff when he was stressed. Em hadn't come out of her room since Myra left, not for dinner, not for breakfast, nothing. Chris took a breath. Reached for the envelope. Harrison and Associates, Family Law. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind of stationery that screamed, "We charge $400 an hour and we're worth every penny." He slid his finger under the flap, pulled out the documents inside, and started reading. R.E., Marriage of Stringer, Miriam K.V. Stringer, Christopher J. Dear Mr. Stringer. This letter serves as formal notification that our client, Miriam Stringer, has retained Harrison and Associates to represent her interests in the dissolution of your marriage. Dissolution. Such a clinical word. Like their 12 years together were just a chemical compound that needed to be broken down into its base elements. Chris kept reading, and with every paragraph, the cold knot in his stomach pulled tighter. Myra wanted primary custody of both children. She wanted the house, their house, the one on Magnolia Drive that they'd picked out together, the one where Clay had taken his first steps and Em had learned to ride her bike in the driveway. She wanted 60% of their combined assets. She wanted child support payments that would basically leave Chris living in a studio apartment eating ramen for the next decade. And there was more. Given concerns regarding Mr. Stringer's temperament and recent incidents of physical aggression, we believe supervised visitation may be appropriate until such time as Mr. Stringer can demonstrate physical aggression. Chris's hands started shaking. One moment of losing control, and now it was being weaponized against him, turned into legal ammunition. Made to sound like he was some kind of monster instead of a desperate man watching his family fall apart. He read the phrase again, recent incidents of physical aggression. Incidents, plural. What else had Myra told them? What other moments from their marriage had been twisted and reframed to paint him as dangerous? The documents went on for pages. Legal jargon, asset calculations. Proposed custody schedules that gave him every other weekend and one Wednesday dinner per month. Wednesday dinner. Like he was some distant uncle instead of the father who'd been there every single day of his children's lives. Chris set the papers down, pressed his palms against his eyes until he saw stars. She'd been planning this. While he was walking on eggshells trying to figure out what was wrong, Myra had been meeting with lawyers, building a case, getting her ducks in a row. The race had started and he was still at the starting line. His phone buzzed, a text from his colleague Marcus at work. "Hey man, heard you're going through some stuff. Call me if you need anything. I've got a guy." A guy. Marcus had gone through a nasty divorce 2 years ago, lost his house, lost half his retirement, barely sees his kids now. Chris had bought him drinks and listened to him vent, never imagining he'd end up in the same position. He stared at the text for a long moment, then typed back, "What's your guy's name?" The response came immediately, "Abel Thornton, best divorce attorney in Austin." Saved my ass. Want his number? Abel Thornton's office was on the 14th floor of a glass tower downtown, wedged between a tech startup and a dental practice. The elevator ride-up felt like ascending to face judgment. The waiting room was surprisingly warm, leather chairs, a few plants, framed photos of Austin landmarks on the walls, not the sterile corporate vibe Chris had expected. Mr. Stringer, a receptionist with kind eyes and silver earrings, smiled at him. Mr. Thornton will see you now. Abel Thornton was not what Chris had pictured. He'd imagined some slick shark in a three-piece suit. Instead, the man who rose to greet him was in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and a handshake that was firm without being aggressive. Chris, Abel gestured to a chair across from his cluttered desk. Sit down, tell me everything. Everything? Everything. So Chris did. The whole story, Myra's weeks of silence. The devastating conversation in the kitchen. The line she'd used, not each other's people, and how it had echoed across 15 years. The moment he'd grabbed her shoulders, the horror of realizing what he'd done, the way she'd looked at him afterward. And then the envelope. The demands, the complete blindsiding. Abel listened without interrupting, made occasional notes on a yellow legal pad. When Chris finally ran out of words, the lawyer set down his pen and took off his glasses. Okay, first things first. Abel's voice was calm, practical. You're not the first good man to end up in this chair, and you won't be the last. The system isn't always fair, but it's navigable. That's what I'm here for. What are my chances? Abel sighed. Honestly, it depends. Myra's lawyer is Lily Androfonos. You know that name? Chris shook his head. She's young, hungry, and absolutely ruthless. Abel pulled a file from a stack on his desk. She's only been practicing family law for 6 years, but she's already built a reputation. Wins ugly, plays hardball. Her clients love her because she gets results. Great. Chris's stomach churned. So I'm screwed. I didn't say that. Abel leaned forward. I said she's tough, but tough doesn't mean unbeatable. We just have to be smart. He spread out the documents Chris had brought, Myra's demands, the settlement proposal, all of it. Let's go through this point by point. Primary custody, we're going to fight that. You've been an involved father. You work a stable job, you've never had legal trouble, you've got no history of violence. Except for what happened in the hallway. Abel nodded slowly. Except for that, and Lily will use it, count on it, but one isolated incident during an emotionally devastating moment. That's not a pattern, that's a man in crisis. We can argue that. Can we win? I think we can get you 50-50 custody. Maybe more. Abel tapped his pen against the desk. What matters most to you here, Chris? Walk me through your priorities. My kids, the answer came without hesitation. I want to be in their lives, not every other weekend and one Wednesday dinner. I want to actually be their father. Okay, that's our North Star, Abel made a note. Asset division we can negotiate. The house is trickier. She's going to argue stability for the children, keeping them in familiar surroundings. But if we can demonstrate that you're the one providing that stability. They talked for another hour. Abel explained motions and filings and temporary orders. He explained what the court would look at, what factors mattered, how judges in Travis County tended to rule. It was overwhelming, like learning a foreign language while someone pointed a gun at your head, but Abel's steady presence helped. One more thing. Abel stood, signaling the meeting was ending. Lily Androfonos is going to try to provoke you. That's her style. She'll push buttons, make accusations, try to get you to react emotionally in front of witnesses. Whatever you do, keep your cool. I'm not usually. I know. Abel's eyes were understanding. But you're going through hell right now. Your fuse is shorter than normal. So when you're in that room with her, remember, anything you do or say can and will be used against you. Let me do the talking. Chris nodded. When's the meeting? Abel checked his calendar. Thursday, their office. 10 a.m., he extended his hand again. We're going to fight for your kids, Chris. That's a promise. Chris drove home in a daze. The afternoon sun was too bright. The traffic on I was a snarling mess of brake lights and honking horns. Everything felt surreal, like he was watching his own life through a dirty window. His phone rang, unknown number. Hello, Mr. Stringer, a woman's voice. Smooth, professional. With an edge underneath that made Chris's skin prickle. This is Lily Androfonos. I represent your wife. Chris nearly swerved into the next lane. How did you get this number? Public record. She sounded amused. I just wanted to reach out personally before our meeting Thursday, professional courtesy. I have a lawyer, you should talk to him. Oh, I know all about Abel. A light laugh. Good man, competent, but I wanted to give you some friendly advice, one human being to another. I don't need your advice. This doesn't have to be ugly, Chris. His name in her mouth sounded wrong, too familiar. Myra just wants what's fair. If you cooperate, make this easy, everyone walks away with something. But if you fight, she let the silence stretch. Well, I'm very good at fighting. Is that a threat? It's information. Her voice hardened slightly. Thursday, 10 a.m. I look forward to meeting you in person. The line went dead. Chris gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. His heart was pounding. His palms were slick with sweat. Lily Androfonos, he didn't know what she looked like yet. Didn't know anything about her except what Abel had said. But that phone call told him everything he needed to know. She was going to destroy him if she could. And right now, sitting in traffic with his whole life falling apart around him, Chris had no idea how to stop her. He pulled into his driveway 20 minutes later. The house looked the same as always, red brick, white trim, the old oak tree in the front yard that Clay liked to climb. But it felt different now, haunted by the ghost of the family that used to live here. Chris sat in his car for a long moment, staring at the front door. Thursday. That was 3 days away, 3 days to prepare for the fight of his life. He got out of the car. Walked up the path, let himself in. The house was still too quiet, but somewhere upstairs he could hear Em crying. Chris took the stairs 2 at a time. Thursday morning arrived like a sentencing. Chris stood in front of his bathroom mirror trying to knot his tie for the 4th time. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. The silk kept slipping through his fingers like it was actively trying to escape. "Come on," he muttered. Finally, he got it, not perfect, but close enough. He smoothed down his jacket, the navy blue one he usually saved for client presentations, and tried to see himself the way a judge would, decent, professional, not a monster. But those words from the settlement proposal kept echoing in his head. Concerns regarding temperament, physical aggression, like he was some kind of ticking bomb instead of a father who loved his kids more than breathing. His phone buzzed. "Abel, meet me in the lobby at 9:45. Remember, let me do the talking." Chris typed back, "Got it." But even as he sent the message, he knew keeping quiet was going to be the hardest thing he'd ever done. The law offices of Harrison and Associates occupied the top floor of a building in downtown Austin that probably cost more per square foot than Chris's entire house. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area that screamed money. Polished marble floors. Abstract art on the walls. A receptionist who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, with perfect makeup and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Stringer and Mr. Thornton?" She consulted a tablet. "Conference room be right this way." Abel fell into step beside Chris as they followed her down a hallway lined with windows overlooking the Austin skyline. The view was stunning, the river glittering in the morning light, the Capitol dome rising in the distance. But Chris couldn't appreciate any of it. His stomach was in knots. "Remember," Abel murmured, "neutral face no matter what she says." "I know. I mean it, Chris. Lily's going to push buttons. That's her whole strategy." "I know." Conference room B was exactly what Chris had expected. A massive mahogany table that could seat 12. Floor-to-ceiling windows with those same million-dollar views. A carafe of water and crystal glasses set out like props in a movie about rich people destroying each other. 2 people were already seated on the far side of the table. Myra looked up when Chris entered. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second before she looked away, arms crossed, jaw tight. She was wearing a blouse he'd bought her for their anniversary 2 years ago. The irony was not lost on him. But it was the woman beside Myra who drew Chris's attention. Lily Androfonos was younger than he'd expected. Maybe 32, 33. Blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Sharp features, a crisp white blouse and a charcoal skirt that probably cost more than Chris's suit. Everything about her was polished, precise, calculated, but it was her eyes that made his skin crawl. They swept over him like a scanner, assessing, cataloging, filing away data for later use. There was no warmth in them, no humanity, just cold, clinical intelligence. "Mr. Stringer." She rose and extended a hand. Her grip was firm, her smile didn't reach those predatory eyes. "I'm Lily Androfonos, thank you for coming. Didn't realize I had a choice." Her smile widened slightly. "Please, sit." They took their seats across the table, Chris beside Abel, Myra beside Lily. The distance between them felt both too far and not nearly far enough. "Let's get started, shall we?" Lily opened a leather portfolio. Concerning custody of the minor children, Clayton and Emily, Clay and M, Chris interrupted. Their names are Clay and M. Abel's hand touched his arm, a warning. Lily didn't miss a beat. Clay and M, of course. She pulled out a document. Our position remains that primary physical custody should be awarded to Mrs. Stringer. Given her role as the children's primary caregiver throughout the marriage. That's not accurate. The words were out before Chris could stop them. We both worked, we both raised those kids. Chris, Abel's voice was calm but firm. Let me handle this. Lily's eyes glittered. Please, Mr. Stringer, let the professionals talk. The condescension in her voice made Chris's blood pressure spike. But he forced himself to lean back, to breathe, to let Abel take over. My client has been actively involved in both children's lives since birth, Abel said smoothly. He's attended parent-teacher conferences, coached Little League, handled bedtime routines, school pickups. When his schedule allowed, Lily cut in. Which, according to Mrs. Stringer, was significantly less than half the time. That's a lie, Chris couldn't help it. I was there every single, Chris. Abel's hand on his arm again, harder this time. Myra still wouldn't look at him. She sat frozen beside Lily, staring at the table like it held the secrets of the universe. Lily continued as if Chris hadn't spoken. Our proposal is that Mr. Stringer receive visitation every other weekend, Friday evening through Sunday evening, plus one weeknight dinner per week. That's not visitation. Chris's voice came out strangled. That's nothing. That's scraps. It's standard in cases where there are concerns about the custodial parent's stability. Stability. Chris was on his feet before he knew what he was doing. I've been the most stable thing in those kids' lives. Myra's the one who walked out without warning, who planned this whole thing behind my back while I was trying to figure out what was wrong with our marriage. Mr. Stringer. Lily's voice was ice. Please sit down. Don't tell me to sit down. Don't you dare tell me to. Chris. Abel was standing now too, hand on Chris's shoulder. Take a walk. Get some water. Now. The room was spinning. Chris could feel his heart pounding in his ears, could see Myra finally looking at him, her expression a mixture of vindication and something that might have been pity. He forced himself to breathe, forced his legs to move, walked out of the conference room without another word. The hallway was mercifully empty. Chris leaned against the wall, pressing his forehead to the cool surface, trying to slow his racing heart. What was he doing? Abel had told him to stay calm, had warned him exactly this would happen. And he'd walked right into it anyway, given Lily exactly what she wanted, proof that he couldn't control himself. 10 minutes later, Abel found him in the hallway. That was bad, no sugarcoating. She's going to use that. I know, you stood up, raised your voice, in a room with your wife who claims you have anger issues. I know, Chris pressed his palms against his eyes. She was lying, Abel. Sitting there with that smug look, saying I was never around when I was there every single day. It doesn't matter what the truth is if you can't present it calmly. Abel's voice softened slightly. I know this is hard. I know she's pushing your buttons on purpose, but you have to be smarter than this, Chris, for your kids. Chris nodded. His throat was tight. What happens now? We go back in. We finish the meeting, and then we prepare for court because after that display, Lily's definitely not going to settle. They went back in. The rest of the meeting was a blur of legal jargon and pointed comments. Lily brought up the hallway incident, the physical altercation, with clinical precision. She mentioned a time Chris had shouted at Clay during a Little League game, one time when the umpire had made a terrible call and Chris had lost his temper for 5 seconds. She painted a picture of a man on the edge, barely contained, dangerous. And Chris had to sit there, silent, hands clenched under the table, listening to his entire character get assassinated. Myra barely spoke. She just sat there, nodding occasionally, letting Lily do the dirty work. Once when Lily mentioned the hallway, Chris saw Myra flinch slightly. Her eyes flickered with something, discomfort, maybe even guilt. But then it was gone, replaced by that same stony distance. I think we've established our positions, Lily finally said, closing her portfolio. We look forward to Mr. Thornton's response. And of course we'll see you in court for the temporary orders hearing. She stood, extended her hand to Abel, then to Chris. Chris took it. Her grip was the same as before, firm, cold, practiced. Mr. Stringer. Those predator eyes met his. I hope you'll consider what's really best for your children. Sometimes the most loving thing a father can do is step back. It took every ounce of willpower Chris had not to respond. He walked out of that conference room feeling like he'd been run over by a truck. Abel walked beside him, already typing on his phone, probably drafting their countermotion. "She's good," Abel muttered in the elevator. "I'll give her that. She's a monster. She's a lawyer, there's overlap." Abel looked up from his phone. "We're not done, Chris. This was just the opening round. The judge will see through some of this, the manufactured incidents, the exaggerated claims. We just have to stay focused." The elevator doors opened. They stepped into the lobby. "When's the court hearing?" 2 weeks, temporary orders. It'll determine custody arrangements while the divorce is pending." 2 weeks. 14 days to figure out how to save his relationship with his children. Chris walked out into the Austin sunshine, but he couldn't feel any of its warmth. The Travis County Family Courthouse was not designed to inspire hope. Fluorescent lights, scuffed linoleum floors, the faint smell of industrial cleaner and desperation. Chris sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 4B, his suit jacket too tight, his tie too strangling, waiting for his life to be decided by a stranger in a robe. Abel sat beside him, reviewing notes. Calm, professional, like this was just another Tuesday. For Chris, it felt like an execution. "Remember," Abel said without looking up, "when we get in there, you don't speak unless the judge asks you a direct question, and even then keep it short. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, that's it. I know the drill. Knowing and doing are different things." Abel finally looked at him. "You've been doing better. The last 2 weeks you've kept your head down. Don't blow it now." Chris nodded. He had been doing better. He'd gone to 2 sessions with a therapist Abel had recommended. Started doing breathing exercises when he felt the anger building. Focused every ounce of energy on being the calm, stable father the court needed to see. But sitting here, waiting, knowing that Myra and Lily were somewhere in this building preparing to destroy him all over again. The calm felt very, very fragile. "Stringer versus Stringer?" A bailiff appeared at the courtroom door. "We're ready for you." Abel gathered his papers. Chris stood on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Show time. The courtroom was smaller than Chris had imagined. A raised bench for the judge, 2 tables facing it. A few rows of seats behind, mostly empty except for a couple waiting for their own case to be called. Myra was already seated at the table on the left, Lily beside her. Myra was wearing a conservative blue dress. Her hair was pulled back. She looked tired, fragile, sympathetic. Chris realized with a sick lurch that this was intentional. Everything about her appearance was calculated to make her look like a victim. He took his place beside Abel, tried not to look across at the woman who used to be his entire world. "All rise." Everyone stood. Judge Rebecca Mayall entered through a door behind the bench. She was exactly as Abel had described her. Mid-50s, stern face, blonde bob, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She moved with the efficiency of someone who'd seen 1,000 cases just like this one and expected this one to be equally tedious. "Be seated." She settled into her chair, opened a folder. "In the matter of Stringer versus Stringer, case number 2024, FC 08847. This is a hearing for temporary orders regarding custody and support during the pendency of the divorce. Ms. Androphonos, you may begin." Lily rose. Her white blouse was immaculate. Her voice was smooth as honey poured over broken glass. "Thank you, Your Honor. My client, Miriam Stringer, is seeking primary physical custody of the minor children, Clayton, age 10, and Emily, age 7. Mrs. Stringer has been the primary caregiver throughout the marriage, managing the children's medical appointments, school activities, and daily routines while also maintaining full-time employment as a registered nurse at St. David's Medical Center." She painted a picture. A loving mother, a dedicated professional. A woman who'd sacrificed and struggled to hold her family together while her husband. What? Chris waited to see how she'd characterize him. He didn't have to wait long. "Unfortunately, Your Honor, there have been concerning incidents regarding Mr. Stringer's temperament." Lily's voice dropped into a tone of grave concern. During the conversation in which Mrs. Stringer expressed her desire for a separation, Mr. Stringer became physically aggressive. He grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her against a wall with enough force to cause her head to strike the surface. Chris's fists clenched under the table. Abel's foot pressed against his, a warning. "Mrs. Stringer feared for her safety in that moment," Lily continued. And while she recognizes this may have been an isolated incident, she has concerns about what future stressors might trigger similar behavior, particularly in front of the children. She went on, mentioned the Little League incident. Mentioned other moments Chris barely remembered, times he'd raised his voice, times he'd slammed a door in frustration. Normal human reactions to normal human stress, but in Lily's telling they formed a pattern, a dangerous pattern. When she finally sat down, Chris felt like he'd been publicly flogged. Abel rose. "Your Honor, Mr. Stringer is a loving, devoted father who has been actively involved in his children's lives since birth. He has no criminal history, no history of domestic violence, no prior complaints of any kind." He laid out the facts: Chris's stable employment, his clean record, the coaching, the carpooling, the bedtime stories, the homework help. All the unglamorous daily work of parenting that somehow didn't count when your wife decided to leave. "Regarding the incident Ms. Androfonos mentioned," Abel said carefully, "Mr. Stringer deeply regrets that moment. It occurred during an extremely emotional conversation in which he learned, without warning, that his wife was ending their 12-year marriage. He released her immediately. He has never in 15 years together laid a hand on Mrs. Stringer or either child in anger. He requested joint custody. Week on, week off. Equal time for both parents." Lily's rebuttal was swift. "Your Honor, until we can be certain of the children's safety, we believe caution is warranted. We're not saying Mr. Stringer is a bad father, only that there are legitimate concerns that should be addressed before equal custody is appropriate. We would request that Mr. Stringer complete a certified anger management program as a condition of any expanded visitation." Anger management. The words hit Chris like a slap. He wasn't an angry person. He'd never hit anyone in his life. And now he was being treated like a criminal because he'd lost his composure for 5 seconds during the worst moment of his entire existence. "Your Honor, I've never hurt my kids." The words were out before he could stop them. Abel grabbed his arm. The judge's eyes snapped to him, sharp warning. "Mr. Stringer." Her voice was cold. "You will remain silent unless addressed directly." "Is that understood?" Chris's face burned. "Yes, Your Honor." She turned back to her notes, made some marks. The silence stretched. When Judge Mayall finally spoke, her voice was measured, clinical, like she was reading a grocery list instead of determining the fate of a family. "The court finds that temporary orders are necessary while this matter proceeds. Regarding custody, primary physical custody of the minor children shall be awarded to the mother, Mrs. Stringer." Chris's heart stopped. "Mr. Stringer shall have visitation every other weekend, Friday through Sunday, plus 1 weeknight dinner per week, to be arranged by mutual agreement of the parties. Every other weekend. Wednesday dinner. Exactly what Lily had demanded. Additionally, given the incident described in testimony, Mr. Stringer is ordered to complete a court-approved anger management course within 60 days. Until such course is completed, visitation shall be supervised by a court-approved third party or conducted at the Travis County Family Visitation Center. Supervised. He couldn't even see his own children without a babysitter watching. Regarding child support, Mr. Stringer shall pay the sum of... The numbers blurred together. Chris couldn't hear them, couldn't hear anything except the roaring in his ears, the pounding of his heart, the sound of his entire life collapsing. The judge was still talking, something about review hearings, compliance requirements, modification procedures. But Chris was gone, lost in a fog of disbelief and rage. "This court is adjourned." The gavel banged. Myra stood, didn't look at him. Lily gathered her papers with a satisfied smile. They walked out together, heels clicking on the linoleum, leaving Chris sitting in the wreckage of everything he'd ever cared about. "Chris," Abel's voice from very far away. "Chris, we need to go." He stood. Somehow his legs moved. Somehow. Abel was talking, something about appeals, about compliance, about how this was just temporary and they could fight it. But Chris couldn't process any of it. Supervised visitation. He couldn't tuck his kids in at night, couldn't drive them to school. Couldn't be in the same room with them without some stranger watching, waiting for him to prove he was the monster they'd made him out to be. They reached the lobby. Abel said something about calling tomorrow, staying strong, not giving up. Chris nodded in all the right places. Then Abel left and Chris was alone in the Travis County courthouse, surrounded by other shattered families, other broken lives, and he couldn't breathe. He needed air. He pushed through the doors, found the parking garage, walked into the dim concrete structure like a man sleepwalking through his own nightmare. His car was on level 3. He walked toward it, loosening his tie, jacket slung over his arm, trying to remember how to make his lungs work properly. And then he heard the footsteps. Click, 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 heels on concrete, echoing in the empty garage. Chris turned. Lily Androfonos emerged from between two parked cars. Her portfolio was gone. Her professional smile was gone. What remained was something else entirely, a predatory amusement that made Chris's skin crawl. Tough day, huh? Her voice echoed off the concrete walls. She walked toward him slowly, like a cat approaching a cornered mouse. What do you want? Chris's voice came out hoarse. You won, it's over. Over? She laughed softly. Honey, this is just the beginning. She stopped a few feet away. Closer than professional distance, closer than appropriate. I wanted to give you some advice, she said, off the record, one human being to another. I don't want your advice. You should. Her eyes glittered in the dim light. Because the way this usually goes, the man fights for a while, thinks he's going to win, gets his hopes up. And then reality sets in and he realizes the system isn't built for him. She stepped closer. Chris held his ground, even though every instinct screamed at him to move. You seem like a decent guy, Chris. His name in her mouth was obscene. Decent guys don't do well in these situations. They get chewed up and spit out. So here's my advice, don't fight it. Accept the terms, behave. Show up for your supervised visits, do your little anger management classes, play nice, and maybe in a year or two, things get better. And if I don't, her smile widened, then I make sure you never see those kids again. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. You can't. I can. She stepped even closer. Close enough now that Chris could smell her perfume, something expensive and floral. I've done it before, men like you think you're special, think you're different, but you're all the same, predictable, easy. Her hand came up, touched his chest, slid down slowly, deliberately. Chris went rigid. What are you? SHH. Her fingers continued their descent, lower, past his belt, cupping him through his slacks with a grip that was somehow both intimate and threatening. You know what I realized? The system might own your time, the judge might own your money, but me, her grip tightened. I own these now. Chris couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His brain was screaming at him to shove her away, to tell her to go to hell, but he knew that any aggressive move could be twisted against him. One call from her and he'd be in cuffs. Assault on an officer of the court. His visitation gone entirely. She had him, she knew it, and she was enjoying every second. Good boy, she murmured when he didn't resist. You're learning already. She released him, stepped back, adjusted her blouse as if nothing had happened. Stick to the script, Chris. Her voice was light again, almost friendly. Do what you're told, accept the crumbs, and maybe, just maybe, you'll get through this in one piece. She turned and walked away. Her heels clicked on the concrete, echoing like gunshots. Her figure disappeared into the shadows, swallowed by the parking garage darkness. Chris stood alone. His hands were shaking. His whole body was shaking. Humiliation and fury and helplessness churned inside him like a toxic storm. This was rock bottom. This was the worst moment of his entire life. He sank against his car, let himself slide down until he was sitting on the cold concrete floor. Pressed his hands against his face, and in the silence of that parking garage, something shifted, something hardened. He wasn't going to stick to the script. The house felt like a tomb. Chris sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the debris of his former life. Clay's math homework from 2 weeks ago never turned in. M's hairbrush with its tangle of brown strands. A sticky note in Myra's handwriting, pick up milk, still stuck to the refrigerator, ghosts, all of it. He'd called the kids an hour ago, supervised phone call because apparently that was his life now, 20 minutes timed by whoever was monitoring at Myra's parents' house. When can we come home, Dad? Em had asked, her voice small and confused. Soon, sweetheart. The lie had tasted like ash. Real soon? Clay had barely said anything, just grunted one-word answers until Chris had run out of ways to fill the silence. The kid was 10 years old and already learning to wall himself off from the pain, just like his mother. Chris's beer sat untouched in front of him. He couldn't drink, couldn't eat, couldn't do anything except replay Lily's words in his head. I own these now. Stick to the script. The doorbell rang. Chris didn't move. It rang again. Then a pounding on the door, followed by a familiar voice. Chris, open up, man, I brought food. Pete. Chris dragged himself to the door. His best friend since college stood on the porch, loaded down with paper bags that smelled like curry and 2 six-packs of beer. "You look like death," Pete announced, pushing past him into the house. "When's the last time you ate?" "I don't remember." "That's what I thought." Pete headed for the kitchen, already unpacking containers. "Vindaloo from that place on 6th, extra spicy the way you like it, and Kingfisher because American beer tastes like pea water." Pete Reyes had been Chris's roommate freshman year at UT Austin. They'd stayed close ever since, through graduations, marriages, kids, the whole messy journey of adult life. Pete was loud, opinionated, and had absolutely zero filter. He was also the most loyal friend Chris had ever had. "Heard about the hearing," Pete said, popping open 2 beers. "Marcus texted me, said it was bad." "Bad doesn't begin to cover it." Chris sank into a chair, accepted the beer Pete pushed toward him, took a long pull and felt the cold spread through his chest. "Tell me everything," Pete said, so Chris did. The hearing, the judge's ruling, the supervised visitation. And then, haltingly, his face burning with shame, the parking garage, what Lily had said, what she'd done. Pete's expression darkened with every word. "Hold on." He set down his beer hard enough to slosh foam onto the table. "She grabbed your junk in a parking garage and basically threatened to destroy your life if you don't roll over. That's about the size of it." "What the hell?" Pete was on his feet pacing. "That's harassment. That's assault. You should report her." "Report her to who?" Chris laughed bitterly. "She's a lawyer. I'm the guy with anger management issues. Remember, who's going to believe me?" "But she can't just—" "She can, that's the point." Chris took another pull of beer. "The system is rigged, Pete. She knows it. She's exploiting it, and there's nothing I can do about it." Silence. Pete stopped pacing. Stared at Chris with an expression caught between fury and helplessness. "So what?" he finally said. "You just give up, let them win." "I don't know what else to do." Pete dropped back into his chair, opened another beer even though his first was still half full. His face was scrunched up in that way it got when he was thinking hard, a rare occurrence that usually preceded either brilliance or disaster. "There's got to be something," he muttered. "Some way to turn this around. She's a lawyer, but she's also clearly corrupt as hell. Corrupt people make mistakes. They get cocky, they slip up. And you need to catch her slipping up." Pete's eyes lit up. "Think about it. If she's this brazen with you, she's probably done it before, probably does it all the time. She's got a pattern, and patterns can be exposed." "How am I supposed to expose anything? I can't even see my kids without a chaperone." "You get evidence." Pete leaned forward. "She cornered you in a parking garage. She'll do it again." "People like her can't help themselves. They're addicted to the power trip. So next time she tries something, you're ready." Chris frowned. "Ready how?" "You record her." The words hung in the air. "Record her," Chris repeated slowly. "You mean like you get one of those voice recorder apps on your phone, or a lapel mic, you can buy them on Amazon for like $30. She comes at you again, starts running her mouth about how she owns you, you capture every word." Chris's heart was beating faster. It's leverage." Pete's voice was intense. "You get her on tape admitting to unethical conduct, threatening you, whatever she's doing, that's her career, that's her whole identity. She'll do anything to keep that from getting out." "But how do I even get her alone again? The next time I'll see her is in court with a dozen witnesses." Pete grinned. That slightly manic grin he got when a plan was coming together. "You don't wait for court. You reach out to her, make her think you're surrendering, that you want to talk privately about making a deal. She'll eat that up. She wants you broken, remember? She wants you to come crawling to her." Chris thought about it. The idea was insane, risky, possibly illegal depending on recording consent laws in Texas. But then he thought about Clay's voice on the phone, that dead tone. The way the kid had stopped calling him Dad and started calling him Chris at the end of the call, like he was already practicing for a future where his father was just some guy who showed up every other weekend. He thought about Em crying herself to sleep, about Myra's cold triumph, about Lily's hand on him in that parking garage, marking her territory like he was something to be owned. "It could backfire," Chris said slowly, "if she finds out what I'm doing. Then you're no worse off than you already are." Pete spread his hands. "Look, man, I know it's a risk, but right now you're playing defense and losing. This is offense. This is taking control. Take control." When was the last time Chris had felt in control of anything? "Even if I got something on her," he said, "what would I do with it? Go to the police?" Maybe, or maybe you use it the same way she's using the system against you. You leverage it, make her fix this mess she created, get your custody arrangement changed, get your life back. It was crazy. It was desperate. It was exactly the kind of thing that could blow up in his face and make everything worse. But what was the alternative? Accept the crumbs, watch his children slip away week by week, visit by supervised visit, until he was nothing but a stranger they used to call Dad. I need to think about it, Chris said. Don't think too long. Pete raised his beer. Opportunities like this don't wait forever. They ate the curry, drank the beer. Talked about other things for a while: sports, Pete's job, his wife's latest obsession with home renovation shows. Normal stuff, safe stuff. But underneath, Chris's mind was racing. After Pete left, Chris sat alone in the silent house. The beer bottles were lined up on the table like soldiers. The curry containers were empty. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. He pulled out his phone. Scrolled through his contacts until he found her. Lily Androfonos Harrison and Associates. Her number was right there. From the case correspondence. Professional contact information, like she was just another lawyer and not the woman who'd grabbed him in a parking garage and told him she owned him. His thumb hovered over the call button. If the system is rigged against me, he thought, then I'll just have to break the rules. He thought about Clay, about Em, about the life that was being stolen from him piece by piece. He pressed call. It rang twice before her voicemail picked up. That smooth, professional voice. You've reached Lily Androfonos at Harrison and Associates. Please leave a message. Chris took a breath. Ms. Androfonos, it's Chris Stringer. I've been thinking about what you said about accepting things. I'd like to talk privately. Maybe we can work something out. He left his number, hung up. Then he went to his laptop, opened Amazon, searched for lapel microphone and voice recording device. 2 days later, a small package arrived at his door. Inside was a tiny microphone, no bigger than a button, and a recording app already downloaded to his phone. The trap was set. Now he just had to wait for the spider to crawl in. 3 days after Chris left that voicemail, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. Mr. Stringer. Lily's voice was warm, almost friendly. I got your message. I have to say I'm surprised. Don't be. Chris kept his voice carefully neutral. You were right. I've been fighting a losing battle. Maybe it's time to be smart about this. Smart is good. He could hear the smile in her voice. What did you have in mind? I want to talk about the custody arrangement, see if there's any flexibility, but I don't want to do it through lawyers. That just gets expensive and complicated. I was thinking, somewhere private, where we can actually have a conversation. A pause. Chris's heart pounded. All right, she said finally. I'm staying at the Clarence Hotel downtown for a few days. Meet me at the lobby bar tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. The Clarence? It's quiet, private, perfect for the kind of conversation you seem to want to have. Her tone left no doubt about what she thought he was offering. Chris felt sick, but also underneath that, a cold clarity. She was taking the bait. I'll be there, he said. I'm looking forward to it. A light laugh. See you tomorrow, Chris. The line went dead. Chris stood in his kitchen, phone in hand, staring out the window at the Austin skyline. Tomorrow night, he'd walk into the lion's den. He'd let Lily think she was in control, think she was winning, and he'd capture every damning word. It was risky. It was dangerous. It was probably the stupidest thing he'd ever done. But for the first time since Myra had walked out that door, Chris Stringer felt something other than despair. He felt hope. The Clarence Hotel rose like a monument to money on Congress Avenue. Chris sat in his car in the parking garage, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel. The dashboard clock read 7:47 p.m., 13 minutes until he walked into the lobby. 13 minutes until he either turned this nightmare around or made everything 1,000 times worse. He reached into his jacket pocket, felt the tiny lapel mic, no bigger than a shirt button, sewn into the inside lining. His phone sat in his breast pocket, recording app already running, the screen dark but capturing every sound. One shot, that's all he had. His reflection stared back at him from the rearview mirror, same navy suit from court, same face, but something was different in his eyes now. Harder, colder. What had Lily said in that parking garage? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Time to find out. The lobby of the Clarence was exactly what Chris expected from a hotel that charged $400 a night. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine. A crystal chandelier the size of a small car. Soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. The kind of place where everyone spoke in hushed voices and pretended their problems didn't exist. Chris approached the bar. Leather armchairs, dim golden lighting, a bartender in a vest who looked like he'd stepped out of a speakeasy movie. Sparkling water, Chris said, sliding onto a stool. Lime. Of course, sir. He needed to stay sharp. No alcohol, no clouded judgment, just pure, cold focus. The water arrived in a crystal glass. Chris held it without drinking, watching the entrance. His palms were sweating. His heart was doing something uncomfortable against his ribs. What if she didn't show? What if this was all a trap and she'd figured out his plan and right now the police were click, 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 heels on marble? Chris turned. Lily Androfonos walked through the lobby like she owned it. She'd changed since their last meeting, no more crisp professional attire. Tonight she wore a black dress that probably cost more than Chris's car payment, cut low enough to suggest and high enough to leave questions. Her blonde hair was down, falling in waves past her shoulders. Diamond earrings caught the chandelier light. She looked like a woman expecting to win. Chris! She smiled that predator smile as she approached. Leaned in and kissed his cheek, her perfume expensive and overwhelming. I'm glad you called. Thanks for meeting me. Well, she slid onto the stool beside him, crossing her legs in a way that made the dress ride up. You sounded so defeated on that voicemail. I had to see for myself. The bartender appeared. Lily ordered white wine without looking at him. So. She swirled the glass when it arrived. You said you wanted to talk about making things easier. I'm listening. Chris took a breath, reminded himself of the mic in his pocket, the phone recording everything. I've been thinking about what you said in the garage. Oh, her eyes glittered. Which part? The part about sticking to the script, about not fighting. And maybe you were right. The words tasted like poison. Maybe I've been making this harder than it needs to be. Lily sipped her wine, watching him over the rim, calculating. That's very mature of you, Chris. I just want to see my kids, that's all I've ever wanted. He let his voice crack slightly, gave her the desperation she expected. If there's any way to make that happen, if there's something I can do. Something you can do. She set down her glass, leaned closer. Like what exactly? I don't know, whatever it takes. The silence stretched. Lily's smile widened. You know, she said softly, I appreciate a man who knows when he's beaten. It's rare. Most of them just keep fighting until there's nothing left. I don't have anything left. No. Her hand found his knee under the bar, squeezed. You don't. Chris forced himself not to flinch, not to react, just sat there playing the role of the broken man she wanted to see. There might be possibilities, Lily continued. Ways to adjust the arrangement, but that kind of flexibility requires trust, mutual understanding. Her hand slid higher. You understand? I think so. Do you? She leaned even closer, her breath warm against his ear. Because if we're going to have this conversation, we should have it somewhere more private. My suite is upstairs, room 1407. Chris's stomach churned, but he nodded. Lead the way. The elevator ride was silent except for the soft hum of machinery and the pounding of Chris's heart. Lily stood beside him, that satisfied smile playing on her lips. She thought she'd won. Thought he was just another desperate man, broken by the system, ready to do whatever she demanded. Keep thinking that, Chris thought. Keep thinking you're in control. The doors opened on the 14th floor. Lily walked ahead, her heels silent on the plush carpet. Room 1407 was at the end of the hall. She slid the keycard, pushed open the door. After you? The suite was ridiculous. A living area bigger than Chris's first apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the Austin skyline, the Capitol dome glowing in the distance. A king-size bed visible through an open doorway. Room service remnants on a side table, half-eaten steak, an empty wine bottle. Lily closed the door behind them. The click of the lock was very loud. Can I get you something? She moved to the minibar. Whiskey, something stronger. I'm fine. Suit yourself. She poured herself another wine, took a long sip, then set the glass down and turned to face him. Let's be clear about what's happening here, Chris. Her voice shifted. Harder now, the mask of seduction giving way to something sharper. You want better terms, I can make that happen, but nothing comes free. What do you want? What do you think I want? She walked toward him, slow, deliberate, like a cat cornering a mouse. I've been doing this a long time, she said. I've seen every kind of man walk through my office. The angry ones, the sad ones, the ones who think they're smarter than everyone else. She stopped in front of him, close enough that her perfume filled his lungs. You're none of those, you're just... Broken, and broken men are my favorite. Why? Because they're so grateful. Her hands came up, began loosening his tie. They'll do anything for a little bit of hope, a few extra hours with their kids, a chance to feel like they matter again. Chris stood frozen, every instinct screaming at him to push her away, to tell her exactly what he thought of her and walk out. But the mic was recording. The phone was capturing every word. For Clay and Em, he reminded himself, everything for them. Here's how this works, Lily continued, pulling his tie free. You do exactly what I tell you. You make me happy, and maybe I put in a good word with Myra. Convince her that a slightly more generous custody arrangement is in everyone's best interest. And if I don't, then I make sure you never see those kids unsupervised again. She smiled sweetly. I've done it before. Judge Mayall and I have a very good working relationship. One call from me about concerning behavior, and your supervised visits become supervised video calls. Then nothing at all. She stepped back, gestured toward the bedroom. Your choice, Chris. What's it going to be? Chris looked at the bedroom door, looked back at Lily. He thought about the parking garage, the way she'd grabbed him, the absolute certainty in her voice when she'd said she owned him. He thought about Clay's voice on the phone, the way the kid had called him Chris instead of Dad. He thought about Em crying herself to sleep. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. The bedroom was dim, just the ambient glow from the city lights outside. Lily directed everything, where to stand, what to remove, her voice calm and commanding like she was running a business meeting instead of. This, Chris obeyed, mechanically, distantly. His mind focused entirely on the mic in his discarded jacket, still recording, still capturing her words as she made demand after demand. You know what I like about this arrangement? Lily said, watching him. The power, the complete, absolute power. Myra thinks she's calling the shots, but really it's me. I own her case. I own her future. A pause, and right now, I own you. Keep talking, Chris thought. Keep telling me exactly who you are. That's it, she murmured as he complied with her instructions. Good, you do what I say, and I'll make sure Myra gives you a few crumbs. That's how this works. That's always how this works. Time blurred. Chris retreated somewhere inside himself, a survival mechanism he didn't know he had. He registered sensations, her hands, her perfume, the silk of the sheets, but kept himself detached, focused on the goal. And then something shifted. Maybe it was the way she laughed, that same cold, superior laugh from the parking garage. Maybe it was everything that had been building inside him for weeks. The humiliation, the powerlessness, the rage he'd been forced to swallow. Chris stopped following her instructions. He moved, faster than she expected. His hands found her wrists, pinning them above her head against the pillows. For the first time, he saw fear flicker in her eyes. What are you? You like using people. His voice was low, rough. Is this what you wanted from me? Complete control? Her breathing had changed. No longer calm, no longer commanding. Chris, you don't own me. He leaned close, let her see something in his eyes that made her go still. You never did. The encounter continued, but the power dynamic had flipped entirely. Lily wasn't directing anymore, she wasn't in control, and judging by the confusion and unexpected vulnerability in her expression, she had no idea how to handle it. When it was over, Chris disengaged immediately, started dressing in the dark, movements quick and efficient. Lily lay on the bed, still catching her breath. When she spoke, some of that familiar superiority had crept back into her voice, but it sounded hollow now, shaken. A deal's a deal, she said. I'll talk to Myra. You do that. Chris pulled on his jacket. Felt the weight of the mic against his chest. Everything he needed captured and stored. See you in court, Lily called after him as he headed for the door. Then strangely, not all women are like Myra. Pick better next time, Chris. He didn't respond, just walked out, closed the door behind him. The hallway was empty, silent. Chris made it to the elevator, stepped inside, pressed L for lobby. Only when the doors closed, only when he was completely alone, did he let himself breathe. He pulled out his phone, checked the recording. There it was, every word, every incriminating admission. I own her case, I own her future. You do what I say, and I'll make sure Myra gives you a few crumbs. I've done it before. For the first time in weeks, Chris smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was grim, determined. The smile of a man who'd done something terrible for all the right reasons and wasn't sure yet whether he could live with it. But he had what he needed. Now he just had to use it. The bar was called Rusty's, a dive on East 6th Street that smelled like cheap beer and bad decisions. The kind of place where nobody asked questions and the jukebox only played country songs from the 1990s. Pete was already there when Chris walked in, sitting in a back booth, 2 whiskeys waiting, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. "Well," Pete half rose from his seat. "How'd it go, did you?" "Not here." Chris slid into the booth, picked up the whiskey, downed it in one burning swallow. Pete's eyes went wide. "That bad? That complicated?" Chris signaled the bartender for another round. His hands were steadier now, but something inside him was shaking, something that might never stop. "Okay." Pete leaned forward, voice dropping. "Did you get it, the recording?" Chris pulled out his phone, set it on the table between them. "I got everything." Holy, Pete grabbed for the phone. Chris stopped him. "No, you don't need to hear it, trust me." "But, Pete," Chris's voice was sharper than he intended. "I said no." Something in his tone made Pete pull back, study his friend's face more carefully. "You okay, man? You look like you just came back from a war." Something like that. The fresh whiskeys arrived. Chris didn't touch his. Just stared at the amber liquid, seeing things he wished he could unsee. "She's worse than we thought," he finally said. "Lily, she's not just aggressive, she's completely corrupt. She practically admitted to manipulating judges, said she owns Myra's case, said she's done this before with other men." "Jesus." "Yeah." Pete sat back, ran a hand through his hair. "So what now?" "We take this to the Bar Association, get her disbarred. That takes too long, months, maybe years, and even if it works, it doesn't help my custody case right now." "Then what?" Chris finally looked up, met Pete's eyes. "I use it the same way she uses the system, as leverage." "You mean blackmail?" "I mean negotiation, from a position of strength." Chris's jaw tightened. "She cornered me in that garage and told me to stick to the script. Told me men like me always lose. Well, I'm rewriting the script." Pete was quiet for a long moment, processing. "What exactly are you going to demand?" 50-50 custody, week on, week off, fair division of assets, and no more of this anger management or supervised visits garbage." Chris's voice hardened. "My kids deserve their father. I'm going to make sure they have him. And if Lily doesn't cooperate, then I leak the recording, not to the Bar Association, to the press, to social media, to every client she's ever had." Chris picked up his whiskey. "She'll cooperate." Pete whistled low. "Damn, that's cold." "I learned from the best." They sat in silence as the jukebox switched to a Garth Brooks song about unanswered prayers. Chris thought about the irony. All those nights he'd prayed for his marriage to survive, for Myra to change her mind, for some miracle to put his family back together. Those prayers weren't getting answered, but maybe he didn't need them to. "There's a settlement meeting scheduled for next week," Chris said. "Abel set it up before all this. It's supposed to be a formality, Lily laying out the final terms, us agreeing to get destroyed. But now it's my turn to make demands." Chris drained his whiskey, set the glass down hard. "And Lily's going to listen, or she's going to watch her entire career burn to the ground." Pete raised his own glass. "To burning it down, then? To getting my kids back?" They clinked glasses. The whiskey burned going down, but Chris barely felt it. Later that night, Chris sat alone in his car outside his dark, empty house. The recording played softly through his phone speaker. Lily's voice, syrupy and confident. "You do what I say, and I'll make sure Myra gives you a few crumbs." He thought about Clay, 10 years old, already building walls around himself the way kids do when they're hurting. He thought about Em, 7 years old, asking when she could come home. He looked at the photo on his phone's locked screen, the 3 of them at the Austin Zoo last spring, Clay pretending to be too cool for the petting zoo while Em fed a goat. They were laughing, all of them, a family. That photo felt like it was from another lifetime. Chris closed the recording app, took a deep breath. One more meeting, one more confrontation. Then maybe, just maybe, he'd get his life back. Abel's office felt different this time. Same cluttered desk, same law books lining the walls, same view of downtown Austin through the 14th floor windows, but something had shifted in the air. Some invisible current of power that Chris could feel humming under his skin. He wasn't the victim anymore. "You seem calmer today," Abel observed, shuffling papers. "That's good. We need to present a united front even if the terms they're offering are." "The terms are going to change." Abel looked up, frowned. "Chris, I appreciate the optimism, but Lily's not exactly known for flexibility. The best we can hope for today is maybe getting the supervised visits lifted once you complete the anger management." "Abel," Chris leaned forward, "trust me, the terms are going to change." Something in his voice made the lawyer pause, study him more carefully. "What do you know that I don't?" Nothing you need to worry about, just follow my lead today, okay? Before Abel could respond, there was a knock on the door. His assistant poked her head in. Mr. Thornton, Mrs. Stringer, and her attorney are here. Send them in. Myra looked tired. That was the first thing Chris noticed when she walked through the door, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. The conservative dress she wore hung slightly loose, like she'd lost weight. Good, he thought viciously, then immediately felt guilty for thinking it. Lily, by contrast, looked immaculate as always. Navy suit today, every hair in place, that familiar predator smile firmly fixed on her face. Chris! She nodded at him like they were old friends, like 3 nights ago hadn't happened at all. Abel, shall we get started? They settled into chairs around Abel's conference table. Myra on one side, Lily beside her, Chris and Abel on the other. I'll cut right to it, Lily began, pulling documents from her briefcase. We've reviewed the temporary orders and we're prepared to offer some minor adjustments. Mrs. Stringer is willing to add 1 additional weeknight dinner to Mr. Stringer's visitation schedule, pending successful completion of the anger management course. 1 dinner. Abel's voice was carefully neutral. That's your concession. That's our offer, take it or leave it. Chris sat silently, watching Lily. She was good at this, the casual cruelty, the appearance of reasonableness while offering nothing of substance. 3 nights ago in that hotel room, she'd been just as confident, just as certain of her power. Actually, Chris said, I have a counter-proposal. Lily's smile flickered. I don't think you're in a position to 50-50 custody. Chris's voice was calm, steady. Week on, week off, equal time with both parents. Lily laughed, actually laughed like he'd told a particularly good joke. Chris, we've been through this. The judge already ruled. The judge ruled on temporary orders based on the information presented to her. Information that was, let's say, selectively curated. Chris leaned back in his chair. I'm sure if Judge Mayall knew the full picture about the tactics being used to manipulate this case, about certain extracurricular activities between counsel and opposing parties, she might feel differently. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Lily's smile froze on her face. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Chris pulled out his phone, set it on the table. Would you like to hear some of those facts, Lily? I have them recorded. Dead silence. Myra looked between them, confused. What's going on? What recording? Nothing, Lily said quickly, too quickly. He's bluffing. Am I? Chris's thumb hovered over the play button. Should we find out? For a long, terrible moment, nobody moved. Then Lily stood abruptly. Myra, could you excuse us for a moment? I need to speak with Mr. Stringer privately. But, just for a moment, please. Myra looked bewildered, but she stood. Abel caught Chris's eye, a questioning look, but Chris nodded slightly. It's okay, I've got this. The door closed behind them, and then it was just Chris and Lily alone in the conference room. The mask was gone. For the first time since Chris had met her, Lily Androfonos looked genuinely afraid. Her face was pale. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly at her sides. What do you want? Her voice was low, dangerous. I told you 50-50 custody, fair asset division, all the anger management and supervised visit requirements dropped. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Chris stood, walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of her, close enough to see the panic in her eyes. You told me to stick to the script. Remember, you said men like me always lose. Chris, my turn to write the script. He pulled up the recording on his phone, pressed play. Lily's voice filled the room. I own her case, I own her future, and right now I own you. He let it play for another few seconds, then stopped it. There's more, he said quietly. Much more, enough to end your career, enough to get you disbarred and probably prosecuted for ethics violations, enough to make sure you never practice law again. Lily's breathing was ragged. If you release that, I don't want to release it, I want my kids. Chris held her gaze. Give me what I'm asking for and this recording disappears. Fight me and I send it to every news outlet in Texas. Your choice. The silence stretched. Chris could see her calculating, weighing options, looking for an escape route. There wasn't one. Fine. The word came out strangled. Fine, I'll talk to Myra, convince her to accept the terms. You'll do more than that. You'll make sure the paperwork goes through. You'll make sure Judge Mayall signs off. And then you'll disappear from this case entirely. I can't just... You can. Chris stepped closer, let her see the steel in his eyes, because the alternative is much, much worse, and we both know it. Lily was silent for a long moment. Then, incredibly, she smiled, not her predator smile, something sadder. Almost impressed. "Well played," she murmured. "I underestimated you." "Most people do." She straightened her jacket, smoothed her hair, rebuilt her mask one piece at a time. "I'll need a few minutes with my client," she said, her voice almost normal again, "to explain the new developments. Take all the time you need." Chris stepped into the hallway. Myra was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, looking lost. "What the hell is going on?" she demanded. "What did you say to her? The truth. Which is—" Chris looked at his wife, his soon-to-be ex-wife, and felt a complicated surge of emotion, anger, grief, and underneath it all, a strange kind of pity. "Lily's been playing you, Myra, playing both of us. Using this divorce to feed her own ego, her own appetites. I showed her that it's time to stop." Myra's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then slowly something that might have been shame. "I didn't know," she said quietly. I just wanted this to be over." "It almost is." The conference room door opened. Lily emerged, looking composed but somehow diminished, like a lion that had been declawed. "Myra," her voice was brisk, professional. "I've been thinking about the case. I believe a more equitable custody arrangement is in everyone's best interest. Fighting this out in court will only traumatize the children further." Myra stared at her. "You said I was wrong." "Sometimes settling is the wisest course." Lily wouldn't meet Chris's eyes. "I'll have new paperwork drawn up by end of week. Week on, week off custody, fair division of assets, no further restrictions on Mr. Stringer's time with the children." Myra looked from Lily to Chris and back again. Whatever had passed between them, she didn't understand it, probably never would. "Okay," she said slowly. "If you think that's best." "I do." An hour later, Chris walked out of Abel's office building into the Austin sunshine. His phone buzzed, a text from Abel. "I don't know what you did, but it worked. Papers will be ready by Friday. Congratulations." Chris tilted his face toward the sky, felt the warmth on his skin, breathed in the smell of cedar and exhaust and possibility. His phone buzzed again. This time a photo from Pete, a bottle of champagne with the caption, "For when you win." Chris typed back, "It's over. We won." Pete's response was immediate, "Drinks tonight, no excuses." Chris smiled, started walking toward his car. It was over. The war anyway. The marriage was still gone. The pain was still there, but his kids were coming home. That night, alone in his empty house, Chris received one final message. An email from Abel, agreement signed. 50-50 custody confirmed. First week with children begins Monday. He read it 3 times, then set down his phone, walked to Clay's room, and started making the bed. His son was coming home. 2 months later, Saturday morning broke warm and golden over Austin. Chris stood in his kitchen, the same kitchen where Myra had shattered his world with 6 quiet words and flipped pancakes while Em supervised. "That one's lopsided," she announced from her perch on the counter stool. "It's character. Lopsided pancakes have more character. That's what you said about the burned ones last week. Those had extra character." From the living room came the sound of Clay's YouTube video, something about building a trebuchet out of household items. The kid had progressed from watching to actually constructing. Last week he'd launched a water balloon clear over the backyard fence and into the Hendersons' pool. Chris hadn't even been mad. He'd been too busy laughing. "Dad," Em tugged his sleeve. "Can we go to the zoo today? Maybe next weekend, sweetheart. Mom's picking you up at noon, remember?" "Oh, right." Her face fell slightly, then brightened. "But next weekend we can go." "Next weekend we can definitely go." The doorbell rang. Chris checked the clock. 11:47. Myra was early. "Clay, Em, your mom's here." The scramble began. Last-minute searches for missing shoes, forgotten homework, a stuffed elephant that Em absolutely could not live without for 7 days. Chris helped them gather everything, then walked them to the front door. Myra stood on the porch. She looked better than she had at that last meeting in Abel's office. More rested. More herself, somehow. Like the weight of the legal battle had been pressing on her too, and its absence was a relief. "Hey," Chris opened the door wider. "They're almost ready. No rush." The kids burst past him, throwing themselves at their mother with the enthusiasm that never got old, no matter how many custody exchanges Chris witnessed. Myra laughed, actually laughed, as Em nearly knocked her off the porch. Okay, I missed you too." She kissed the top of Em's head, ruffled Clay's hair, which he pretended to hate and secretly loved. "Go put your stuff in the car. I need to talk to Dad for a sec." The kids obeyed, racing toward Myra's car in the driveway. Chris and Myra stood on the porch, alone for the first time in weeks. "So," Myra crossed her arms. Not defensively, more like she didn't know what to do with her hands. "How'd the week go?" "Good." Em aced her spelling test. "Clay built a medieval siege weapon and terrorized the neighbors." "Sounds about right," a ghost of a smile. "Listen, I wanted to say, I know things have been hard, and I know I didn't handle this well." Chris waited. "The lawyer thing." Myra shook her head. "I had no idea I know. I fired her officially, got a different attorney to finalize everything." She met his eyes. "I'm sorry for all of it." The words hung in the air. Chris thought about all the things he could say, all the anger still simmering somewhere deep inside, the betrayal, the humiliation. The weeks of supervised visits in sterile rooms with court-appointed monitors watching his every interaction with his own children. But he also thought about Em's face when she'd run into his arms that first Monday. About Clay actually hugging him, and whispering, "I missed you, Dad," against his shoulder. Some things mattered more than revenge. "I'm sorry, too," Chris said finally. "For the thing in the hallway when I grabbed you, that's not who I am." "I know," Myra's voice was soft. "I always knew." They stood in silence, two people who had once promised each other forever, now just trying to figure out how to share a couple of kids and a bunch of memories without destroying each other. "Take care of yourself, Chris." "You too, Myra." She walked to her car. The kids waved frantically from the back seat. Chris waved back, watching until the car turned the corner and disappeared. Then he went inside and started cleaning up the pancake disaster. That afternoon, Pete showed up unannounced. "Get dressed," he ordered, barging through the front door. "We're going out." "Pete, it's 3 in the afternoon on a Saturday. I have laundry to..." "Dressed. Now." No arguments. 20 minutes later, Chris found himself at a backyard barbecue in South Austin. "Whose house is this again?" "Marcus's brother's girlfriend's cousin, or something." Pete handed him a beer. "The point is, it's a party, and you need to remember what parties feel like." Chris looked around. The backyard was strung with lights. A grill sizzled with burgers. People laughed and talked and acted like life was simple and good. He'd forgotten that feeling existed. "You've been holed up in that house for 2 months," Pete continued. "Working, parenting, working some more. You won a war, man. You're allowed to celebrate. I don't know if one is the right word. Your kids are back. You kept your house. That psycho lawyer probably fled the state." Pete clinked his bottle against Chris's. "Sounds like winning to me." Chris took a long pull of beer, let the afternoon sun warm his face. Maybe Pete was right. Maybe it was time to stop fighting and start living. "Hey," Pete nodded toward the edge of the yard. "Who's that?" Chris followed his gaze. A woman stood by the fence talking to the host's wife. Dark hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Sundress, easy smile. She glanced over, caught Chris looking, and instead of looking away, she smiled. Chris felt something stir, something he'd thought was dead or at least permanently in hibernation. "No idea," he said slowly. "Well," Pete grinned, "maybe you should find out." "Pete, I'm just saying you're a free man now, youngish. Decent looking if you squint. Maybe it's time to..." "I'm not ready for that." "Who said anything about ready?" Pete clapped him on the shoulder. "Sometimes you just gotta let yourself be open, see what happens." The woman was still looking, still smiling. Chris took a breath. He thought about everything that had happened. The storm clouds 15 years ago. The reconciliation that should have been a warning. Myra's cold declaration in the kitchen. The legal nightmare. Lily's parking garage assault. The hotel room, all of it. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Maybe that was true, or maybe what doesn't kill you just teaches you how to survive. Either way, he was still here, still standing, still breathing. And for the first time in a very long time, the future felt like something to look forward to instead of something to dread. Chris raised his beer toward the woman by the fence. A small gesture. An acknowledgement. She raised hers back. It wasn't a beginning, not yet. But it was the possibility of one, and right now that was enough. Later that evening, the party wound down as the sun set, painting the Austin sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Chris sat on the back porch steps, nursing his 3rd beer, or maybe 4th, he'd lost count, watching the colors shift and blend above the tree line. His phone buzzed. A text from Clay. "Mom says we can video call tomorrow if you want. Em wants to show you her new dance." Chris smiled, typed back, "Can't wait. Love you both." The response was immediate. "Love you too, Dad, Dad, not Chris. Dad." He stared at that word for a long moment. then pocketed his phone and looked back at the sunset. It wasn't a happy ending, not really. Happy endings were for fairy tales, and this was real life, messy and complicated and full of scars that would probably never fully heal. But it was an ending, and a beginning. The worst was behind him, his children were safe, his dignity was intact, and somewhere out there the future was waiting. Chris raised his beer to the fading sky. "To new chapters," he murmured. The sun dipped below the horizon, the first stars appeared, and somewhere in the distance music was playing, something hopeful and alive. Chris finished his beer. Stood up, it was time to go home.